Have my baby as soon as possible.
I felt anything but happy when my estranged partner said that. It was actually quite creepy. After all, it was Ken who had filed for divorce on his own. What an over-selfish person he is. As I remained silent, Ken, misunderstanding something, laughed out loud.
You can't do anything without me, can you?
What? I've remarried, though.
Really?
I couldn't help but laugh at Ken's absurd reaction.
I never thought you were such a slut.
Even such a comment didn't affect me. Don't ever contact me again. I unilaterally informed Ken and hung up without waiting for his reply.
Kate, what's going on?
Actually, when I told Michael about the call, he immediately agreed to handle it. It turns out he had received another call from someone else and planned to deal with both together. As I looked forward to the comeuppance for those two who hurt me, I made myself a cup of tea. My name is Kate Murphy, a 35-year-old housewife. After divorcing my ex-husband about 5 years ago, I remarried. Now I'm a mother of one. Since my marriage to my ex-husband was awful, I feel very happy now. I met my ex-husband, Ken, at a trading company reception where he approached me and we started dating. Many people around me were having arranged marriages, but my parents, having an only daughter, supported my relationship with Ken, wanting me to have a love marriage. After getting my parents' approval, we quickly got engaged and married within a year of dating. Ken was a bit bossy, but generally kind, and our married life went smoothly at first. However, about 6 months after we registered our marriage, his attitude changed completely.
Hey, where's my dinner?
What? I was confused by his sudden demand. Until yesterday, it had been, "What's for dinner today?" or "What shall we eat for dinner?" As I wondered what to respond, Ken raised his voice in irritation.
I'm hungry. Hurry up and get me something to eat.
But I haven't prepared anything yet.
Hey, you're useless. Forget it.
Where are you going? He ignored me and quickly left the house. I stared dumbfounded at the door he had slammed shut. Did I do something wrong? I racked my brain over recent events, but couldn't figure it out. Eventually, Ken came back the next morning, took a shower immediately, and holed up in the bedroom. It was actually my birthday that day, and we had planned to go out to eat, but I couldn't bring myself to mention it and started doing housework.
Hey, the vacuum cleaner is too noisy. Are you trying to annoy me?
No, that's not it. Look, we're not going out today, so I thought I'd clean up.
Not going out is your fault. I have a headache, so keep it down.
I'm sorry. Looking back, it's clear that Ken was to blame, but at the time, I believed I was at fault for upsetting him. And as Ken realized that, he became even more tyrannical.
Your cooking is terrible. Make it again.
Are you serious?
Got a problem with that?
No, not at all. I'm sorry. I was constantly criticized for every meal and every cleaning task, and it wore me down. Yet I still loved Ken and believed he would become kind again. So, every day, I did my chores with utmost diligence. But that wasn't a good approach.
You're like a mannequin. So boring.
Ken scoffed one day before he left the house. Upon his return, he triumphantly declared,
I've been cheating on you.
Why?
Because you're not satisfying me. Got a problem with that?
But we're married. At my words, Ken's eyes widened in anger. He screamed, his face as fierce as a demon's.
Do you have a problem with what I do?
It's not that, but
But don't you even know how to respect your husband?
Ken slammed his hand against the wall with force. His towering presence, a good 8 inches taller than me, completely intimidated me. Then suddenly, he spoke to me in a gentle, coaxing tone.
I don't want to do this. If only you'd try harder.
Yes, I understand. I'll do better.
That's right. A husband's affair is the fault of the wife's shortcomings.
Hearing that, I truly felt it was my fault and nodded. From then on, whenever Ken was displeased, he'd lash out at things. And afterwards, he'd always soothe me in that gentle voice.
I'm doing this for you.
I was utterly trapped by Ken's words, convinced that everything was my fault, that I was inadequate. Then one day, Ken brought home a young woman.
She's pregnant with my baby. From today, she'll live here with me.
What do you mean? Not understanding, I asked again, to which the woman replied smugly,
I'm pregnant with Ken's baby, so you're no longer needed. I married Ken, and from today, I live here.
Excuse me. Even being told she was moving in, I couldn't grasp the situation. Pregnant? Married? All these revelations hit me all at once, leaving me completely confused. I was the one married to Ken. We hadn't divorced, so why was this woman saying she was married to Ken? Ken started explaining the answer to me loudly.
I'm tired of you, and I filed for divorce. Mary signed on your behalf, so you should thank her.
Thank? How am I supposed to manage after a divorce like this?
I don't care. If you want to stay as a maid, you can stay.
Ken sneered and laughed as he said that. That expression was a wake-up call for me. No, thank you. I'll be leaving today.
Going back to your parents' house. Make sure you tell them it's your fault, all right?
No, I'll tell them everything exactly as it happened.
Hey, wait a minute.
Ignoring Ken's attempts to stop me, I grabbed my belongings and left the house. When I arrived at my parents' house, they were shocked and asked about the situation. I told them everything, sparing no details. My parents listened to the end and were furious alongside me. Together with my parents, we went straight to the lawyer at my father's company and filed for damages against Ken and Mary. Of course, Ken and Mary refused to pay, but with a divorce filed without my consent and a new marriage already registered, not to mention a baby on the way, they couldn't escape responsibility. Eventually, I claimed $50,000 from Ken and $40,000 from Mary. Since both were paid in full, it seems they had to take out loans, but that was none of my concern. I was alone again and started working. Initially, I considered going back to office work, but since I enjoyed household chores, I began taking housekeeping jobs privately through my parents' connections. At first, I had 1 or 2 clients, but thanks to word of mouth, I soon had daily requests. One of those clients was Michael Murphy. He was a wealthy man who traveled the world alone, delivering supplies and teaching children. As he was only home a few times a month, he gave me the keys to his house and requested my services. I initially refused, but after repeated requests, I agreed to clean his house a few times a month. Eventually, I was asked to clean while Michael was at home. Michael, who preferred simple things, and I had a lot in common and often had lively conversations. After living this way for about 2 years, Michael said something unexpected.
I've fallen for you, Kate. Would you consider dating me with marriage in mind?
Really? Michael was handsome and smart, and I thought there must be better women out there for him. I initially refused, but Michael didn't give up and kept inviting me on dates. I still remember how happy he looked when I agreed just once. Eventually, after going on a few dates, Michael formally proposed on our 4th date, and I agreed to start dating him. He quickly introduced me to his parents, openly stating we were dating with marriage in mind. My in-laws were very kind and didn't mind that I was divorced. After dating for a year, we remarried. 2 months later, I discovered I was pregnant. Our marriage was so smooth and peaceful that I quit my job, though reluctantly, to focus on home chores. Michael, already skilled in household work, often helped out. With a child on the way, Michael decided to stay in the U.S. However, he wanted to continue his charitable work, so he founded an organization, became its president, and got it running as a corporation in the U.S. to support children overseas.
The happiness of Kate and our child is my top priority.
Michael always said, and my parents cherished him too. Compared to my marriage with Ken, my days were now unimaginably peaceful, and I felt truly happy every day. The payments from Ken and Mary were complete, and I rarely thought about the past. But one day, I received an anonymous call on my smartphone. Michael was out for work, and I initially ignored it, but the persistent ringing forced me to answer. Hello.
Hello, Kate.
May I ask who it is?
It's me. Surely, you haven't forgotten, right?
His tone made my spine freeze. Could it be? Why is he calling me now after all this time? Is that you, Ken?
That's right. You always get it, Kate.
I wasn't pleased to be praised like that. I wanted to end the call quickly, so I prompted the main subject. What can I do for you?
Such formalities.
Ken spoke cheerfully, updating me about various recent events. However, none of it mattered to me. This has nothing to do with me, right?
Don't be so sulky. You've reflected by now, haven't you?
Reflected? I was utterly confused and repeated the question. Just then, Michael came home. I signaled him with my eyes. At the same moment, Ken, sounding joyful over the phone, broached the main topic.
Yay, if you've reflected, let's get back together.
Get back together?
Come on, have my baby as soon as possible.
I wasn't happy to hear this from someone I was no longer connected to. Rather, it was disgusting. Besides, it was Ken who filed for divorce without telling me. What an over-selfish person he is. As I remained silent, Ken, perhaps misunderstanding, laughed out loud.
You can't do anything without me, can you?
What? I'm already remarried.
Really?
His ridiculous voice made me burst into laughter.
I never thought you were such a slut woman.
His words didn't affect me. Don't ever contact me again. I stated unilaterally without waiting for Ken's reply.
Kate, what happened?
Well, I explained to Michael about the phone call, and it seemed we were going to deal with another one together. Looking forward to getting even with those two who had hurt me, I made some tea. A few days later, a lawyer visited our home. He was the lawyer who helped during the divorce, and now he not only takes care of my father's company, but also Michael's. After discussing recent events with the lawyer, he promised to take immediate action. While Michael and the lawyer were talking, my phone rang. I exchanged looks with both of them and placed my smartphone on the table, speaker on.
Kate, I was confused because it was so sudden the other day, but lying is bad. You're not really remarried since I'm still here.
I sighed at his selfish interpretation. How could I have ever loved such a man? Michael gave a wry smile and took over the call.
It's not a lie. I'm Kate's current husband.
What are you talking about, Kate? You should call the police on this delusional guy right away.
It's not a misunderstanding. We're truly married. We've even registered our marriage.
Ken grew increasingly agitated as Michael spoke calmly throughout. I made it clear to Ken. It's true, I'm remarried, so please don't contact me anymore.
So you're being stubborn again. Did someone tell you to say that?
No, it's not like that. There's a lawyer here. You can talk to him if you like. The moment I mentioned lawyer, Ken clicked his tongue on the other end. Then, with an irritated voice, he commanded me,
Then get a divorce quickly and come back to me. I'll forgive you if you grovel. I'm coming to get you tomorrow.
Ken's utter lack of understanding gave me a headache. Then the lawyer spoke up calmly.
Ken, you do know there's a restraining order against you approaching Kate, right? Any contact would mean you owe her compensation.
That's expired by now, hasn't it?
That's not how it works. It's still in effect.
Finally, Ken's bluster seemed to diminish at the lawyer's words. However, next he tried to persuade me with a smoother tone.
Come on, Kate. You'd be happier with me, wouldn't you? Is it really impossible?
It's impossible because, you see, I have a child now.
Do you have a child?
Ken seemed shocked and fell silent on the phone. Michael declared as if to drive the point home.
You're bossy and selfish, Ken. I can make Kate happier than you could. We will never divorce, and she will never return to you.
I nodded and held Michael's hand. While Ken was silent, I hung up the phone. For about 2 weeks, there were no calls from Ken. Just when I thought he had given up, one day the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Who could that be? I stood in front of the intercom and was shocked. There were Ken and Mary, his affair partner, whom I had heard had split up, but apparently they were still connected. I pressed the record button on my smartphone before responding. You're supposed to stay away.
If you have money, pay back the compensation.
I've been watching calmly for 5 years and people change, but based on what Mary said, it seemed they were after money by showing up at our house. The fact that I'm wealthy and paying you back compensation doesn't match up.
It's all the same. How much money do you want?
No, that's not really it. Why are they acting so high and mighty when they were the ones who cheated? I was baffled. Then Mary began to explain her situation and invited.
I got engaged. He's a senior at my company, a good man. I can tell him I have debts. You understand, right?
Congratulations on your engagement. But what does that have to do with the compensation? I truly didn't understand. But it seemed my attitude rubbed Mary the wrong way.
That's why. I'll forgive the debt part, so just give back the money. You're not struggling with money, are you? I heard you're wealthy.
Mary began to scream hysterically, and fear crept up on me. I doubt they can get in because of the auto lock, but what if they forcefully enter through the window? As I thought about what to do if Mary tried to force her way in, she shouted even louder.
Where on earth did you find such a handsome guy? I'm much better suited for him. Hand him over.
I'm sorry, but my husband is not an object.
I know that much.
Mary snapped back immediately after my reply, and Ken laughed from behind her. It might have been funny, but it was disrespectful. Then Mary started yelling at Ken.
I had no idea you were Pua.
This ticked Ken off, and he retorted,
You lied about being pregnant too, didn't you?
That was a misunderstanding.
You were so sure of yourself, though.
They completely forgot about my presence and started arguing with each other. The mention of pregnancy from that time was a lie. I felt as if a thorn in my heart had slightly dissolved. Just then, a police officer appeared on the intercom screen.
No, this is not it.
It's just a small argument, officer.
They started making excuses. But the officer wasn't having it and took them away. I slumped down at the intercom. Phew, I'm glad they didn't get in.
Are you okay?
It turned out that Michael had called the police. In fact, I had contacted Michael before answering the intercom. He had told me to record the conversation because he was coming home soon. Sorry for bothering you when you're busy. Thank you.
Kate's safety is always the priority. Don't worry about it.
I felt reassured by the dependable Michael. I'm really glad I remarried him. I truly felt that from the bottom of my heart. Thanks to the lawyer informing the police about the restraining order, Ken and Mary were thoroughly dealt with. However, they started calling the lawyer daily, demanding money back.
It seems like we should settle this for good.
After receiving a call from the lawyer, Michael and I decided to confront them directly. When the lawyer relayed that we would meet, both Mary and Ken happily agreed, probably thinking they would get some money. We prepared meticulously and were ready for the day of the showdown. Thanks to prior notice, my parents also came to support us. When we arrived at the designated place, Ken and Mary were already there, and shockingly, my ex-in-laws, Susan and Stephen, were there too. The ex-in-laws glared at me with fierce looks as soon as they saw me. Thank you all for gathering here today. Let's start the discussion. With that cue, everyone looked at me. I placed 2 sheets of paper on the table first. These were the penalties for violating the restraining order. Ken and Mary's eyes widened as they saw them.
What is this amount?
There's no way we can pay this.
The paper stated a penalty of $30,000 for each of them. They were flustered and started complaining to me. The ex-mother-in-law, Susan, then spoke up.
Kate, aren't you getting a bit carried away?
What? Confused by her remark, I blinked in surprise and Susan laughed scornfully. And then she started talking nonstop.
They've already paid compensation for the affair, yet you're still demanding more money. I thought wealthy people were more gracious, but you seem rather shameless.
Did you say I'm shameless? It seemed she was implying that I should drop the current charges. However, I had no intention of doing that. Indeed, I wasn't struggling financially, but this was a fine for breaking a promise. Naturally, they had an obligation to pay. I explained this to Susan, but she was not convinced.
You were once our daughter-in-law, you know, and yet you're so forward. I couldn't imagine behaving like that.
Ken and Mary nodded in agreement with her words. They seemed confident because all three shared the same opinion. I sighed and played the recording from the other day. Susan's face turned red as she listened. Michael then pointed it out.
Embarrassing, isn't it? A 40-year-old man getting in trouble with the police in front of his ex-wife's house. I couldn't show my face in public if I were him. It's too shameful.
Susan glared at Michael, grinding her teeth in frustration, unable to retort. I need to say something too. With a thought, I spoke up. Well, at least nothing was damaged. It would have been a real problem if something like a statue had been broken. You know, that one is worth $800,000.
$800,000.
Susan turned pale at my words. Ken and Mary's mouths hung open in shock. That's when I realized something. I had never discussed my parents' assets with Ken. My parents' total assets are around $29 million, so it's not a big deal to us. But if there had been damages, Ken and Mary would have had a hard time.
$29 million. You're kidding.
Why would I need to lie? Convinced by my confident demeanor that my words were true, Ken hung his head, pale-faced. Mary, who had been watching, suddenly sparkled her eyes and spoke to Michael.
So, Michael, you must be quite wealthy too, right?
What?
Michael expressed clear disgust, but Mary continued unabated. Indeed, Michael's total assets were similar to that of my parents. However, that was irrelevant to the current discussion.
Then, why don't you dump such a demanding wife and marry me? I'm beautiful, and I'd look good in a dress.
Indeed, Mary was still young and amiably beautiful. However, he looked at her coldly.
No matter how beautiful you are, I would never be swayed. My wife is the most beautiful and dear to me in the world.
It was somewhat embarrassing to be praised so openly. As I blushed, Mary glared at me resentfully. That's when I remembered something and told Mary. By the way, I met one of Michael's acquaintances recently. It turned out to be the president of your company, Mary. When I mentioned I knew you, he asked about our relationship, so I filled him in.
What did you say?
I properly explained that you were once married to my ex-husband but divorced quickly. At my words, Mary burst into tears. While I was just being honest, I felt the need to offer another piece of advice. Mary, did you cheat again? That's not good. Also, you really should accurately disclose your marital history. Otherwise, you can't build trust with your partner.
What have you done to me?
I only shared the truth, though. I replied with a smile. When Ken brought Mary along, it had hurt me deeply. A little payback like this seemed mild in comparison. Just then, Michael's phone rang. He answered it and spoke briefly before hanging up. Then he addressed Mary.
Just now, the president called. He said to inform you that your engagement with his son has been called off.
No, no way.
Mary screamed and collapsed onto the table. It was a pitiable situation, but it didn't really concern me. Well then, I look forward to your payment. As I said this, the stunned Susan chimed in.
Because of you, Ken will be in debt again. Don't you feel bad about that?
Yay, don't you feel any guilt?
I pondered for a moment. Guilt? I was simply doing what was necessary. There wasn't much emotion involved in that. Then I remembered something else I hadn't mentioned yet. Oh, that's right. Ken, my husband's company bought your company. He'll be visiting soon for an audit report. Do take care?
No way.
I don't lie, you know. I sought agreement from Michael, who nodded affirmatively. Seeing this, Ken slumped, seemingly out of energy to respond. However, Susan didn't give up and kept pressing. At that moment, the long-silent ex-father-in-law, Stephen, spoke up.
Hey, I'm truly sorry. Please let me apologize on behalf of these two.
He apologized deeply, catching me off guard. Throughout my marriage, Stephen had often criticized Ken's actions and Susan's snide remarks. It was him who insisted on paying the compensation, even if it meant going into debt. That's why I harbored no ill feelings towards him. Stephen, please don't apologize.
It's all right. Let me apologize.
As Stephen apologized, Susan looked at him in disbelief.
I will make sure that the compensation is paid in full, even if it means taking out a loan. And I am going to divorce Susan.
Divorce? Why?
I can't stand your nonsense any longer.
Susan turned pale and clung to him. But his decision was firm, and she soon realized it was futile and hung her head like Ken, ceasing to argue.
Handle the divorce on your end, and we'll be fine as soon as we get the payment signed.
Understood. Come on, both of you. Sign it now.
Prompted by Stephen's stern voice, Ken and Mary reluctantly signed the payment agreement. Michael, my parents, and I verified the signatures before standing up to leave. Just before exiting the room, my silent parents spoke up.
Weren't a reconcilable difference is the reason for the divorce. Indeed, our values differ greatly. Therefore, we ask that you no longer involve yourselves with them.
Our daughter, whom Ken hurt, is now very happy. If anyone intends to disrupt this happiness, be prepared.
Feeling the love from both my parents, I was moved to tears. Holding my hand, Michael smiles at me. We left the situation to be handled by Stephen. Later on, the restraining order fine was successfully paid. I wondered how he managed it, but it didn't really matter. It seems that Ken lost his job due to an audit. He was caught slacking off during work hours and was generally incompetent. He seemed capable when we got married, but it turned out he had been dumping all his work on a junior who eventually got promoted while he was sidelined. As soon as his performance was rated poorly, he was the first to be encouraged to take early retirement. Ken accepted the early retirement, but his severance pay went towards paying off debts, so he's currently looking for another job, according to the grapevine. However, hardly any company in the same industry is willing to hire him, and he seems to be working part-time at a convenience store. After that, Mary truly broke off her engagement. It also came out that she had been cheating with another man, and she is being sued for damages. Unable to pay the settlements to me and her fiancé, she quit her job and now works at a night bar. She had always used her beauty as a weapon, and I thought she would continue doing so. But apparently, at 28, she's considered an old lady at the night spots, constantly struggling as the place hardly makes any money, and she also works a day job. I can't help but feel sorry for her as a fellow woman, but I think she brought it upon herself. Stephen actually got divorced and came to greet me once. He wished me happiness, and I was able to express my gratitude. Now, he has returned to his family's farm and is putting his energy into agriculture, hoping to stay healthy as long as possible. Incidentally, Susan, after being divorced by Stephen, has moved in with Ken. She has never worked in her life, so Ken is paying for all her expenses. She's quite a spendthrift, and according to Stephen, yelling can be heard from the house every day. I've safely given birth in the meantime. A beautiful girl was born. Michael is absolutely smitten and is taking care of her, allowing me to get plenty of rest. Moreover, Michael took paternity leave, so we can care for her quite leisurely during the day. We have such happy times talking about this and that. My parents adore their first grandchild, and every time they visit, she gets new toys. Recently, because she had too many toys, we renovated a room into a toy room. Michael and I are talking about going on an overseas trip when our daughter gets a little older. Every day, I feel thrilled about our bright future, feeling truly blessed.
Kate, it's almost time for breastfeeding.
Okay, I'm coming. Today, Michael is taking care of everything except breastfeeding, so I can read at my leisure. After drinking some decaf tea, I stood up and headed to the living room. In the living room, my baby was crying, arching her back, and Michael, though struggling, looked blissfully happy. I couldn't help but smile at the picture-perfect scene of happiness.
Why are you laughing at me?
Just because. Saying that, I took the baby from Michael and began breastfeeding. I have a feeling that this happiness will continue forever. It's bright outside. Once breastfeeding is over, we should go for a walk, all three of us. I shared this thought with Michael and laughed.